The sun dipped low behind the rolling hills, painting the prairie gold, and William Harlan, a hardened rancher with 30 winters behind him, trudged back from a long day of driving cattle, sweat on his brow and dust in his throat, his heart heavy with the familiar weight of solitude. For though he had land enough and a name respected in the county, he had no family to return to, only silence in the walls of his cabin and the creak of the barn as his only companion. Yet that night something was different, for when he slid the barn doors open, he froze at the sight before him. In the far corner, tied to a post with rough rope, was a figure trembling in the shadows, a girl no older than 20, her dress torn and her wrists raw, her eyes wide with terror as the lamplight fell across her face, and William's hand instinctively went to the revolver at his hip, suspicion flaring. Was this some trap, some outlaw's ploy? But as he stepped closer, the girl shrank back, whispering in a voice cracked with desperation, "Please, don't judge me," and those words, soft as a dying ember, cut through William like a knife, for they were not the words of a bandit or a thief, but of someone who had already been judged too harshly, too cruelly. And as he reached down to untie the rope, his fingers brushing the coarse fibers, he felt her flinch as though even kindness might be another strike, and when the knot slipped loose, she crumpled at his feet, sobbing into her hands, leaving William standing over her in stunned silence, horror dawning in him as he realized that someone had left this girl bound like an animal in his own barn. And though he didn't yet know her story, one thing was clear: her suffering was deeper than anything he could have imagined, and his life, once marked by silence, had just been entangled with a secret that could change everything. For days, William nursed the stranger back to strength, giving her food, clean water, and the safety of his cabin. And slowly she began to speak, her words halting, as if each sentence risked breaking her all over again, until at last she told him her name, Clara, and with it came a story that chilled him more than the prairie wind, for she had been sold like property by a stepfather who wanted nothing more than to be rid of her, traded to a gang of outlaws who had used her as a pawn in their schemes, until they tired of her and tied her in his barn to cover their tracks, certain no one would care what became of a girl the world had already cast aside. And as William listened, his fists clenched with rage, his chest tight with grief, for though he had seen hardship in his life, he had never encountered cruelty so senseless, and the weight of Clara's suffering ignited something in him he thought long buried, the instinct to protect, to fight for someone beyond himself. And so he promised her, in a voice steady as steel, "No man will lay a hand on you again, not while I draw a breath." But Clara, her eyes still shadowed by fear, shook her head, whispering, "You don't understand. They'll come back. They always do." And William knew she spoke the truth, for men who treated life as cheap would not let go so easily. And in the days that followed, as he taught her to ride, as she helped mend fences, as they shared quiet meals by lamplight, an unspoken bond grew between them, fragile yet unbreakable, the bond of two souls scarred by loneliness yet finding strength in each other. And William found himself seeing Clara not as a burden, but as a light, one that slowly warmed the cold corners of his heart. Yet always he carried the dread that the past she had fled would one day thunder back over the horizon, bringing fire, bullets, and a reckoning that neither of them could escape. The reckoning came one morning as the sky blazed red with dawn, the sound of hooves rumbling like thunder across the plains, and William stepped onto the porch to see a half-dozen riders bearing down on his ranch, their guns glinting, their laughter cruel, and at their head was a scarred man whose eyes locked onto Clara with the hunger of ownership. And she shrank behind William, whispering, "Please, don't judge me for what they made me." But William turned, his gaze fierce. "Clara, you've nothing to be ashamed of. Your past ain't your sin." Then he faced the riders, his rifle in hand, his voice like stone. "She's not yours to claim." And the scarred man spat in the dirt, sneering, "Then she'd die with you." And the fight erupted, gunfire shattering the still morning air, wood splintering, dirt kicking up as horses screamed, and William fought like a man possessed, each shot fired not just in defense of land, but in defense of the fragile hope Clara had given him. And Clara, no longer the trembling girl bound by rope, stood her ground too, loading cartridges, handing him bullets with steady hands, her fear burned away by the fire of survival, until at last, with the scarred outlaw sprawled, lifeless in the dirt, and the rest fleeing into the horizon. Silence fell again over the ranch, broken only by the pounding of their hearts. And in that silence, William lowered his rifle and turned to Clara, seeing her not as the broken figure he had untied in the barn, but as the woman who had fought beside him, brave and unyielding. And in a voice thick with emotion he said, "Clara, you're not a girl nobody wanted. You're the reason this place is home." And as tears welled in her eyes, she whispered, "You didn't just untie that rope, William. You untied my soul." And with those words, the rancher who once lived only for silence and cattle knew that love had come to him not in the way he expected, but in the form of a girl who had begged not to be judged and instead became the heart that would carry him through every storm the West could conjure. Riders of the trail, if this story of grit, heartbreak, and redemption touched your heart, don't just ride on, hit that subscribe button to Wild West Stories. Every tale carries the dust, danger, and destiny of the frontier, and the next one might just change the way you see courage, sacrifice, and love. Saddle up and subscribe. Your next adventure is only a story away.